In Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, we are introduced to the profound reality that God, in his eternal power, created the heavens and the earth. This verse reveals the absolute beginning of creation, where God's will alone brings the entire universe into existence. God, being all-knowing and sovereign, did not create in haste, but rather with purpose and precision. Between Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 and verse 2, after God initially brought the heavens and the earth into existence, the universe entered into a standstill state. At this moment, creation existed but had not yet been shaped or brought into its full form and function. It was as if the universe was waiting in silence, preserved in this state of stillness by the hand of God. God, in his wisdom, held the universe in a state of readiness. The universe was covered in waters, which acted as a preserving force, safeguarding the potential of creation. These waters could symbolize a state of inactivity or dormancy, not chaotic but peaceful, waiting for the moment when God would initiate the next phase of creation. During this time itself may not have been moving in the way we understand it, as the creation was paused, still, and quiet. God, who exists beyond time and space, was not hurried. He hovered over the waters, overseeing the universe in its preserved state, sovereignly governing all things. His presence ensured that everything was perfectly aligned for the next step in the process. There was no conflict or struggle in this moment. God, being all-powerful, did not need to fight or subdue chaotic forces, as is seen in other ancient creation myths. Instead, God's authority over the universe was absolute. He chose to hold the waters in a standstill condition until the right moment, ready to separate them and bring forth order. The waters that covered the earth were not destructive or wild. They were a symbol of preservation and potential, safeguarding the yet-to-be-formed creation. Just as a seed holds within it the potential for life, so too the universe, covered in waters, held the potential for the life and order that God would soon establish. The waters, in this sense, represent a sacred stillness, a space held by God, waiting for his next command. In this moment, God's creative power was not idle. Rather, he was preparing to unfold the grand design of the universe, patiently holding creation in its undeveloped form. This standstill allowed everything to be preserved in perfect order, so that when God chose to act, creation would unfold exactly as he intended. As we approach verse 2, the stage is set. The earth was formless and empty, covered in waters, but it was not abandoned or neglected. Instead, it was being prepared by God for the next phase of creation. The standstill state was temporary, a moment of divine pause before the universe would spring into motion. When we look ahead to verse 3, where God speaks light into existence and separates the waters, this marks the moment when the standstill ends. God's creative energy is released and the universe begins to move from stillness into life. This transition from verse 1 to verse 2 shows that God was in complete control, deliberately choosing when to move from a preserved, potential-filled state to one of dynamic creation. In summary, between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, God brought the universe into existence but held it in a standstill state, covered in waters, as a way to preserve the potential of creation. This stillness was not chaotic or incomplete, but rather a divine pause, a moment where the universe under God's sovereign care awaited the next phase of his grand design. The waters symbolized preservation, and God's hovering presence ensured that creation was safeguarded and ready. When the time was right, God would move creation from this stillness into motion, bringing forth light and order, marking the beginning of the universe's unfolding. This interpretation highlights God's wisdom, patience, and control over the entire process of creation, with every detail held perfectly in his hands.